Despite the constant influx of new cards and mechanics that have been introduced to the game throughout the years, Yu-Gi-Oh! Still revolves entirely around three card types and their distinctions: monster cards, spell cards, and trap cards. But there have been a number of cards and mechanics which have attempted to mix these two types of cards together, like trap monsters. Most trap monsters have rarely ever been an accepted part of Yu-Gi-Oh's metagame, which is why they're the subject of today's video, so we've explained why they never really took off, their issues, and even successes as a mechanic. Now, what is a trap monster? Trap monster is the unofficial term used to describe trap cards which are capable of special summoning themselves as a monster to the player's field. They're the exact opposite counterpart to pendulum monsters, which are monsters that can be treated as macro, since trap monsters are trap cards which can be treated as monsters. But while pendulum monsters have an official mechanic to facilitate their use as spells, trap monsters aren't as centralized, so there are a number of differences that can be spotted between the different individual trap monsters, including how they actually become monsters in the first place. So, how do trap monsters become monsters? For some trap cards, it's simply a matter of activating them. Tiki Curse and Tiki Soul can be special summoned to your field by just activating them as you would a normal trap card. Other trap monsters, on the other hand, have their own summoning conditions and can also special summon themselves from places other than the field. The Prime Monarch can be special summoned from your graveyard by banishing another Monarch spell or trap in your grave, and every one of the Paleozoic trap cards has an effect which allows them to special summon themselves from the graveyard as a normal monster when another trap card is activated. Other differences between trap monsters can include the type of trap they are, whether or not they're still treated as a trap card while they're monsters, and whether they're summoned as a normal or effect monster. Now, why are trap monsters a failed mechanic? Despite the diversity of the mechanic, trap monsters very rarely see widespread competitive play for a number of reasons. Conceptually, trap monsters sound incredibly powerful since you're combining the strengths of two card types. Trap cards are already one of the best forms of interaction available, and monsters can be used as combo pieces or for materials for extra deck summons. So, a trap monster that interacts with the opponent and gives you free bond on your side of the field sounds amazing at first. And the best trap monsters actually fulfill that promise, either being a powerful interruption, an incredible extender, or in some rare cases, both at the same time. This, in theory, makes it entirely possible to run a deck without needing to play a single monster card, as instead, you would be able to use your trap card as interaction and as a way to put pressure on your opponent's life points. However, a lot of trap monsters, especially the earlier ones, don't actually interact with your opponent in a profitable way. A large portion of trap monsters have very middling effects, if any effect at all, so the actual interruption they provide isn't valuable. This wouldn't be so much of an issue if you were able to special summon trap monsters immediately, as they'd be useful for some strategies that need extra extenders for board building. For example, a Sprite deck is always going to appreciate having more level 2 extenders. But trap monsters still come with the same harsh restriction as any other trap card. They have to be set for a turn before they can use their on-field effects. This makes trap monsters really unappealing for most strategies that are desperate for extenders. Having to wait a whole turn before you can board build makes it a lot worse than even the worst extenders, as they can at least be used on turn 1. Some trap monsters do circumvent this by summoning themselves from the graveyard, or be able to be activated immediately, but this is an exception and not the rule. These two issues are usually what really holds trap monsters from being a more successful mechanic. If the body isn't immediately beneficial, then the interruption must be strong. And if the interruption isn't strong, then the body must be immediately beneficial. The best and most successful trap monsters in the game have both, but the worst trap monsters in the game have neither. Some good examples of the best trap monsters in the game actually all belong to the same archetype, the Golden Land trap cards: Conquistador, Hackero, and Guardian. The entire Eldlich engine revolves around the Golden Lord itself, the Eldlich spell trap cards, and these three trap monsters, all of which provide the deck with strong interruption. Each of these trap monsters share one effect, that they can banish themselves from the graveyard in order to set an Eldlich spell trap directly from your deck. But you can only use this effect on one of these cards per turn, so you do have to choose between using their interruption or their graveyard effect. Conquistador is the strongest of these three cards. It special summons itself as a level 5 light zombie monster with 500 attack and 1800 defense. But if you also control Eldlich the Golden Lord when it's summoned, you can destroy a face-up card in the field. Similarly, Hackero also summons itself out as a level 5 light zombie monster, but instead of popping a card in the field, if you control an Eldlich the Golden Lord, you can banish a card from either player's graveyard. Even if Conquistador and Hackero weren't trap monsters and were just instead trap cards, they'd still be excellent as both of their interruptions are really strong. Popping any card in the field allows you to clear away your opponent's combo pieces, boss monsters, or even their face-up back row, and having an archetypal DD Crow allows you to easily deal with graveyard strategies. But these cards are also monsters, so they also come with some extra utility that they wouldn't have if they were just regular trap cards. Because they stick around as monsters and are still treated as trap cards, you can send these monsters to the graveyard in order to pay the cost of Eldlich's graveyard effect to bring himself back to the hand or field. This not only gets you your main boss monster back on the field, but also allows you an easy way to put in your golden land cards in the graveyard so you can use their graveyard effects. Both Conquistador and Hackero also provide Eldlich with interesting extra deck options that the deck wouldn't otherwise have access to, allowing the deck easy access to Link Plays and Lina and the Nightmares, as well as giving Eldlich the chance to run a substantial rank 5 package, which includes cards like Constellar Pleiades. Guardian of the Golden Land, however, despite having a lot of the same perks as Conquistador and Hackero, is the worst card of the three, and their contrast helps to showcase what makes a trap monster good, but makes a trap monster bad. Guardian's interruption isn't strong at all. Lowering an opponent's monster's attack to 0 does nothing to actually stop an opponent's combo. Instead, it's a lot more comparable to old battle tricks like Shrink or Honest, which you would use if you really need to protect your golden land from battle, which isn't something that needs to be done often, as Eldlich's stats are already quite high, and get even higher from its own effect, reaching a whopping 3,500 attack and 3,800 defense. Guardian does still have some other niches though. It's a way to out high attack monsters Eldlich will struggle to beat over, and it's still a trap card in the field, so it can be used to pay the cost for Eldlich. It even has the most impressive defense of any of the golden land trap cards. But Guardian is dragged down heavily by the fact it's a level 8 instead of level 5, which means it can't be used alongside Conquistador or Hawk Arrow in order to go into rank 5s, or Eldlich to go into rank 10s. They're the sole level 8 of the archetype, which makes it lose a ton of utility. It's just a lot more awkward compared to the other golden land trap monsters. But even though Guardian is the weakest of the three by far, it does still have some uses it shares in common with Conquistador and Hawk Arrow. All of the graveyard effects set an Eldlich spell trap to your field, and those Eldlich spell traps have graveyard effects which allow you to set the golden land spell traps to your field, so you may still choose to run Guardian as a toolbox option. But as well as common strengths, these cards do share some common weaknesses relating to their nature as trap cards. Because they're still trap cards as monsters, they can easily be cleared from the field by a Lightning Storm or Cosmic Cyclone, and they still need to be set for at least a turn before you can actually use them. The Phantom Knights with Shade Brigandine does not have these same issues. Shade Brigandine is a normal trap card which special summons itself as a level 4 dark monster with 0 attack and 300 defense. But unlike the Eldlich trap monsters, Shade Brigandine is not treated as a trap card while it's a monster, and you can only activate Shade Brigandine once per turn. If this was all Brigandine could do, the card would actually be terrible since it has no way to interrupt your opponent or benefit you in any capacity except for being a very weak body on the field. But despite having no way to interact with your opponent, Shade Brigandine is actually extremely powerful, because as long as you don't have any other trap cards in your graveyard, you can activate Shade Brigandine the turn it's sent. This makes it a viable option for a number of different strategies that need an extra level 4 body in the field for extra deck plays, most notably the archetype that the card belongs to, Phantom Knights. Phantom Knights actually have quite a few trap monsters that are part of the archetype, but all of them are really underpowered when compared to Brigandine, since they all need to be set for a turn before you can use and don't interact with your opponent well. Brigandine, on the other hand, gives Phantom Knights an extra extender to have an easier time accessing their link tools and rank 4 plays, and the fact that it's a trap card that's an extender gives it a neat synergy with the common staples of the Phantom strategy. Brigandine being a trap card makes it superbly easy for Phantom Knights to access. Not only is it searchable by the graveyard effect of Silent Boots, you can also set it directly from your deck with the effect of Phantom Knight's boss monster, Rusty Bardiche, provided you send a Phantom Knights card from your deck to the graveyard. This high searchability, combined with how generic Rusty Bardiche is, has allowed for Phantom Knights to be used as an engine for dark strategies that need to strengthen their end board with Fogblade, or if they need extra extenders to board build, they can rely on Shade Brigandine. Although many decks that use Shade Brigandine don't actually want to run a large Phantom Knight engine and just value the card individually. For example, Time Thief is a dark rank 4 strategy and thus greatly benefits from Shade Brigandine being an extra extender that they can use to further their plays and access their boss monsters, since Shade Brigandine is a level 4 monster, but it's specifically its status as a trap card which can be used as an Xyz material, which makes Brigandine so important for this strategy. You see, Time Thief Redoer and Time Thief Double Barrel are both monsters with an effect that changes depending on the type of material you detach from them. Detaching a monster grants you their weakest effect. Redoer allows you to banish itself until the end phase, and Double Barrel gains 400 attack. Detaching a spell card gives you a stronger effect. Redoer lets you draw a card, and Double Barrel lets you take control of an opponent's monster until the end phase. And detaching a trap card gives you access to their strongest effects. Redoer lets you spin a face-up card to the top of the deck, and Double Barrel lets you negate the effects of one monster on the field. Usually, the trap effect is the hardest to access. Time Thief does have archetypal tools to allow you to access every one of their effects, but it's a lot more difficult to use compared to their monster-based effects. But by using Shade Brigandine as a material, Redoer and Double Barrel would already have a trap card attached as soon as they're summoned, allowing you free access to the strongest interaction without having to jump through the hoops of flyback or startup. Another great example where Shade Brigandine being a trap card is important is with Trap Tricks. Unlike Phantom Knights and Time Thieves, Trap Tricks isn't a combo deck. It's a slow control deck based around the resource management of the whole trap cards, so at first glance, Shade Brigandine doesn't really seem to fit in. But the fact that it's a level 4 trap monster makes it the best extender available for the deck. It gives you easier access to the rank 4 trap monsters while also giving you a trap card that you can activate on your first turn. This is important because it can trigger the first effect of Trap Trick Sarah, allowing you to special summon any Trap Trick monster directly from your deck. And if you just so happen to activate the effect of that Trap Tricks monster, you can also use Sarah's second effect to set any whole normal trap card directly from your deck. This means that a single Shade Brigandine activation while Sarah's on the field allows you 2 level 4 bodies to make a Rafflesia or Almaris, and a free whole normal trap card to interrupt your opponent. Shade Brigandine's strength is clearly due to the fact that it's possible to activate it on your first turn. Phantom Knights actually have a ton of other trap monsters with pretty decent effects. Wrong Magnet Ring is a draw 2, Lost Vambrance gives your Phantom Knight monsters destruction protection, and Tomb Shield can be used from the graveyard as a trap card negate. But every single one of the Phantom Knight trap monsters have fallen into obscurity other than Shade Brigandine, which, despite having no way to interrupt your opponent, has managed to work its way into a myriad of strategies, purely because it's a trap monster that you can use on your first turn to summon a free level 4 monster. It sets a very interesting precedent, because if more trap monsters were capable of summoning themselves out on the first turn, then the mechanic may have actually seen more success in combo strategies. But as it currently stands, Shade Brigandine is an outlier when it compares to other trap monsters, as it's actually a really playable generic extender for combo decks, while most other trap monsters have only seen play in slower control strategies which can facilitate their use. Although that isn't to discount control strategies, as the best trap monsters in the game's history belong to a slow control strategy based around grinding your opponent, and that's because every main deck card in the archetype is a trap monster. Every Paleozoic monster has 2 effects. The first effect is unique to that specific Paleozoic monster, and is activated by using it as a trap card. Dynamiscus can banish an opponent's face-up card, Canadia can Book of Moon an opponent's monster, and Morella can send another trap card from your deck to the graveyard. But every Paleozoic also comes with a shared effect, that when another trap card is activated while Paleozoic is in the graveyard, you can special summon that Paleozoic as a level 2 normal aqua monster that's unaffected by monster effects, but you have to banish it when it leaves the field. This allows for Paleos to work on 2 goals at the same time. The first is using your trap cards as trap cards, interrupting your opponent to key points in their combos. Some Paleos are better than this at others. Dynamiscus and Canadia are amazing ways of interacting with your opponent, and have seen competitive play in non-Paleo decks. But Paleozoic Pikaia and Eldonia are a lot weaker. Still, even weaker Paleos have been made strong with some clever deck building. Paleozoic Morella is a great example of this. Its effect is just a worse foolish burial goods, but it's been used to great effect by Paleo decks to send trap cards with excellent graveyard effects that you can use on your opponent's turn. But if Paleos had only their trap card effects, the archetype would actually be pretty bad. They would have strong interruption, but could only be used as engines for other decks. It's their effects to come back as monsters which skyrocketed Paleo into the competitive scene, and even allowed them to compete against full-power Zodiac. Despite their low stats of only 1200 attack and 0 defense, Paleos can put a ton of pressure on your opponent. This is because the number of extra deck options Paleos has available to them. Anomalous Karis is a pop that can also add a trap card from the top of your deck to your hand. Opababinia lets you activate Paleozoic trap cards from your hand while also letting you search any Paleozoic trap if it has a trap card as an Xyz material. And Cambrobastar can be used to set any Paleo trap from your deck, provided you send a set card in your spell trap card zone to your graveyard, all while protecting your set cards from destruction. But as well as that incredible lineup, Paleozoics also have access to one of the strongest boss monsters in the game, specifically because they summon themselves as level 2 aqua monsters. 2 Paleos can overlay together into totally awesome, which allows you to negate, to destroy, and set an opponent's card to your side of the field. And you're virtually guaranteed to get access to those extra deck plays because of how difficult it is to interact with Paleozoics with monsters. You see, while they do summon themselves as normal monsters, every Paleozoic that's summoned has a lingering effect applied to them, which makes them completely unaffected by monster effects, while also not being treated like trap cards. This means that cards like Cosmic Cyclone and MST can't be used to out Paleozoics as monsters, and because they're unaffected by all monster effects, the only way you can out Paleos with monsters is by battle. And Paleos as a control deck can protect its monsters by using cards like Dupe Frog, Threatening Roar, or even Rise to Full Height, that's been sent to the graveyard by Morella, ensuring your Paleos are protected by battle so they can be used for extra deck plays in the next turn. This is important because when they're used as material for an Xyz summon, instead of being banished, they go to the graveyard when they're detached, putting another Paleo card in the graveyard to be summoned out the next time a trap card is activated, meaning that a handful of Paleo cards can potentially represent a near infinite amount of bodies. This recursion and their strong interruption has allowed for Paleozoics to see competitive play as both a deck and a small engine in other competitive strategies, mainly for their ability to interrupt their opponent as trap cards, but also because they have the potential to return as free bodies for link plays, especially mill-heavy strategies like Tearlaments, which are likely to mill Paleos across the course of their combo. Both their strong interruption and recursion put Paleozoics leagues above other regular trap monsters. A card like Quantum Cat or Metal Reflex Slime may have better stats than every Paleo, but they have no way to actually do damage to an opponent's combo. And while a card like Angel Statue Azarune can have a fatally strong interruption, it doesn't really have much use as a body when compared to the Paleos. Being good as both a monster card and as an interruptive trap card is the key formula to making a trap monster good in the modern era, and the Paleozoics are an excellent example of both. The same is true for the Eldlich cards, acting both as great bodies and an amazing way to stop your opponent's combo plays. But even with this general formula, there are some trap monsters which have seen competitive play without having a good interruption, a good body, or even both. Shade Brigandine is a key example since it's only good as an extender, and not as an interruption. Brigandine isn't the only outlier either. A number of decks throughout the game's competitive history have actually used trap monsters as part of their main engine, but not as their main way of winning the game. The Prime Monarch does not have an amazing effect as a trap card, and can't be used to stop your opponent's plays. But it does have the ability to special summon itself out from the graveyard by banishing another Monarch spell or trap from the grave. This pairs perfectly with Pantheism of the Monarchs, which is able to send the Prime Monarch from your hand to the graveyard to search for any Monarch spell or trap from your deck. This puts the Prime Monarch and Pantheism in your graveyard, so you can banish the Pantheism to summon out the Prime Monarch, which you can then use to tribute summon for your Monarch monsters. And because it doesn't get banished like the Paleos do, you can keep summoning out the Prime Monarch every turn for your tribute summons, making it an archetypal Treeborn Frog that Monarchs definitely took advantage of during their Tier 1 status in 2016. Shadow Core was also a mainstay in Shadows up until 2016. Core is a trap monster that as a monster can be used as a substitute for any attribute for a Shadow Fusion monster for a fusion summon. So even as a dark monster, you can use Core as your light monster for Construct or the fire monster for Grista. The strongest part of Core's effect, however, isn't its ability to summon itself as a monster, it's its graveyard effect, which allows you to add any Shadow spell or trap card from a graveyard to your hand. So you can fusion summon Shadow Construct with the Shadow Fusion, then send Shadow Core from your deck to the graveyard with the effect of Shadow Construct. Then using the graveyard effect of Shadow Core, you can add the Shadow Fusion back to your hand to be used on a later turn. While this used to be a strong part of Shadows, which gave them plenty of follow-up, Core was eventually cut from the deck. Its use as a monster wasn't really that strong, and its graveyard effect became a lot worse when Shadow Fusions could more easily be sent to the graveyard with the advent of Link monsters, allowing the Shadow monsters to use their graveyard effects and add follow-up. Even in alternative formats, trap monsters had their time to shine, like in Speed Duels where Zoma the Spirit dominated. Zoma the Spirit is a trap monster that, when it's destroyed by battle, inflicts damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the monster that destroyed it. While this effect isn't valuable at all in the TCG, Zoma terrorized Speed Duels as an astonishing staple that just about any deck could play. It was a free bot you could use for tribute summons of Monarchs and Hades, and it had a relatively high attack if it stuck around the field, which it often would. You see, in Speed Duels, like Duel Links, you only have 4,000 life points as opposed to 8,000 that you have for the OCG, TCG, and Master Duel. This meant that if your opponent ran over Zoma, they were usually paying around half of their life points just to remove it from the field. And since there's no main phase 2 in Speed Duels, their opponent could just wait for the battle phase before summoning Zoma to make it even harder to remove. So when Zoma was on the field, you basically had to make the difficult choice of either removing Zoma by battle and paying a ton of life points, or letting them keep Zoma on the field and risking a strong tribute summon. Zoma was so strong in Speed Duels that it was placed on the only Speed Duel ban list to be released, specifically for one event only, where it was limited alongside Jinzo and Foolish Burial, to give you an idea just how strong Zoma was in that format. Although in the TCG, Zoma has rarely ever been played. In Speed Duels, the format is, ironically enough, a lot slower than the TCG, so there isn't as much pressure on trap monsters to be as strong as Paleozoics or Golden Land cards. You can summon Zoma the Spirit and expect it to still be there on your side of the field in Speed Duels by the start of your next turn. The same isn't so true in the TCG, where a card like Zoma the Spirit doesn't do anything except body block an opponent's attack, which just isn't enough to be valuable. With the number of extra deck tools and choices of removal that are available in the TCG, it's no longer enough that a trap monster just summons itself to the field so that you can use it next turn. It'll be destroyed by battle, popped, or even banished from the field before you properly use your Tiki Soul for something useful. For the modern format, a trap monster has to be recursive, or has to interrupt, or has to be immediately useful. If it isn't, then it's really unlikely that it'll see competitive play. Even Paleozoic, the archetype solely composed of trap monsters, has cut a number of their archetypal names, like Pikaia and Hallucinagia, because while they are excellent bodies on field, they're terrible interruptions, and you'd much rather just play other staples or engines in their place. All in all, while there have been plenty of trap monsters that have seen competitive play throughout the game's history, but in order to compete in the modern day, they need to do way more than just summon themselves to the field after being set for a turn. The trap monsters that have seen success, however, deserve recognition for turning what would be a slow way of special summoning monster into a genuine meta threat. Some because of their effects as trap cards, but others specifically because of the fact that they're monsters that happen to be a trap card. Even recently, prior to Majestic Mavens, Tearlaments were playing down a Mishkis since it was discarded for effect and could trigger Tearlament graveyard effects, while also being a level 2 monster they could use to go into Sprite Elf. Currently, however, trap monsters aren't seeing much competitive play. Even the Eldlich monsters are taking a backseat as Flu Under Rees is the best control deck available in the format. Although it won't take much for trap monsters to see competitive play again, as long as there's a control deck in the format that can actually use them. While the mechanic isn't a total failure like most of the other videos in this series, future trap monsters would do well to take inspiration from the Golden Land and Paleo cards, since they're interruptions that also happen to be strong bodies that allow you to apply plenty of pressure to your opponent, since Tiki Curse and Tiki Soul aren't going to be tier 0 anytime soon. And that's the video. If you can think of any other ways to fix the mechanic or know of any other mechanics that failed, please let us know down in the comments below.